in the dressing room of Alessandra. There's definitely a gap in the UK greetings card market here, so I'd like you please to suggest niche greetings cards for a specific occasion not currently catered for by greetings cards manufacturers, together with the rhymes or messages inside. So, Tony, you can start this, please.
Congratulations on getting a place at university. Hooray, you're off to uni. It's finally time for fun. 3 years for you to learn and grow before the course is done. Then into the world with head held high, you really are all set. Apart, of course, from 40 years of crushing unpayable debt.
Simon?
Congratulations on a successful organ transplant. You've had a successful organ transplant. Be proud of your new kidney. Your doctor didn't hold out much hope. He thought you'd snuff it, didn't he? But now it seems you're feeling fine. You can even dance a jig. Though according to these doctor's notes, they got it from a
Commiserations on your trousers not fitting. My deepest sympathies. You can't do off your jeans from Golden, but try not to dwell on what's behind, because your behind's the size of Snowdon.
Thank you for 6. I lost my specs, and so your text left me with quite a teaser. At first I thought the picture was the Leaning Tower of Pisa.
Sorry to hear your house has been repossessed. I know you'll take this in your stride. You're not the sort to cause a fuss. Your home's now owned by Nationwide, so suck it up and blame Liz Truss.
Commiserations on not winning the boat race. Disappointing ending to this famous boating race. Dark and Lightfoot gave their all, but both won the place. Even though you're super fit, that there is no doubt. You brought E. coli from the Thames and shat your inside.
Sorry about your botched Brazilian. We're sorry that our therapist made such a painful slip. Please be assured that in response we'll tear her off a strip.
Well, it's very nearly the end of the show. There is just time to fit in a quick round of Vickers Film Club. Samantha tells us that she's no stranger to religion, having once spent several months in the thrall of a free-loving millennial cult after becoming attracted to its charismatic elderly guru. She says she eventually became disenchanted after a thoroughly unsatisfactory evening spent waiting in vain for the second coming. I'm grateful to Mary Beard for sending that in. In this round, teams, I'd like you to suggest the titles of films likely to be enjoyed by Vickers. And I'd like you to start this one, Reverend Richard Coles.
A Streetcar Named Messiah.
Rachel.
10 things I hate about pews.
Alex.
Oppenheimer.
One flew over the curate's vest.
Taken.
From Matthew chapter 2, beginning at verse 8.
Flock, Frock and Two Smoking Carrots.
The Nuns of Navarone.
101 Galatians.
Field of Dreams. Or in the parish hall if wet.
Honey, I shrank the congregation.
Straight out of Compline.
Welby does Dallas.
Lost in transubstantiation.
And so, ladies and gentlemen, as the tender toenail of time is torn from the fickle foot of fate by the deep-cleaning Dyson of destiny, I notice it's the end of the show. So, from the teams, Samantha, myself, and our audience here in Oxford, it's goodbye. Goodbye.
Rachel Paris, Tony Hawks, Alexander Armstrong and Richard Coles were being given silly things to do by Jack D, with Colin Sell setting some of them to music. The programme consultants were Fraser Steele and Stephen Dick. And the producer was John Naismith.
I'm Sorry I Haven't a Clue is a random production for BBC Radio 4. Jack's back with a new episode of the show tomorrow night at 6:30, or again next Sunday lunchtime at 12:30. The World This Weekend is next, after the weather, with Helen Willits.
Richard, thanks very much. Day of contrast weather-wise. It's a rather cool 12 degrees where we've got the sea fog, particularly the northeast coast. 25 though in the sunshine I think today. That's most likely of course England and Wales, where we do have a little bit of sea har on the northeast coast, but elsewhere plenty of sunshine, more than yesterday across the southern half of the UK, which is where we might see the 24, 25 and generally the low 20s anyway, but that may spark the odd heavy shower, more like perhaps Cumbria, 1 or 2 in the south. Not to be ruled out, but they won't be as extensive as yesterday. But they could still be slow moving and thundery and quite torrential in places. Just 13 on the east coast. Northern Ireland have a lot of cloud in the north and 13 here, but we do have more sunshine than yesterday elsewhere, so it feels a bit warmer, 20 or 21 towards Antrim and down, but again the sunshine might just trigger the odd thunderstorm, just 1 or 2 this afternoon. To Scotland, well here we do have that sea fret around, which will linger 11 degrees here, plenty of sunshine in the south, enough to trigger again the odd heavy thundery shower as temperatures get to 21, 22. But there is a little bit more cloud around the yesterday in northern and central Scotland, thick enough to give the odd spot drizzle. Now as we look ahead to tonight, the showers, any of those will fade. The mist, the fog and the low cloud will return quite widely off the east coast. It will be clearer further west, but there'll still be some pockets of fog around inland. And I think it will be a slightly cooler night, and we won't find as much sea fog around the Irish sea coast either through tonight, although it could linger today around Cardigan Bay, worth a note. So tomorrow, relatively quiet day once again really, subtle differences. I think we'll have probably more likely to clear the sea fog from the east coast and keep more cloud instead in the northwest of England and Scotland. Perhaps a little bit more cloud in Northern Ireland again in the west, but just the odd heavy shower here and there. But it does look much more unsettled from midweek on, with more showers Tuesday and perhaps wind and rain by Wednesday, Thursday. Richard.
Thanks Helen, on 92 to 95 FM on BBC Sounds and on your smart speaker. This is BBC Radio 4.
Welcome to the World This Weekend. This is Johnny Diamond. The radical right gathers in Madrid as it surges ahead of the European elections.
What unites them is the nationalism, but the policy solutions will very often differ.
From the man who helped run Europe for a decade, a warning.
The traditional center-left parties forgot sometimes the basic issues of the left, namely the workers. Center-right forgot a little bit about identity. So in fact it's the problem of the center.
We'll hear from Poland and Hungary, as well as from the former president of the European Commission. And the man training computers to recognize sarcasm tells us why he's taken on the task.
For us in our lab, sarcasm isn't really about sarcasm only, it's about natural human-machine interaction. Does that answer your question?
Oh, that's really clear. The BBC News is read by Tom Sanders.
President Biden's national security advisor is holding talks with the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in the latest American push for a more focused military campaign and ceasefire in Gaza. The talks are taking place hours after Jake Sullivan also met the Saudi Crown Prince to discuss a path towards the end of the war and beyond. Our correspondent Dan Johnson sent this report from Jerusalem.
Jake Sullivan's meeting Benjamin Netanyahu as the Israeli leader faces growing criticism and open challenge from within his war cabinet. Military actions intensified in areas of northern Gaza previously cleared, meaning more casualties, Palestinian and Israeli. The only recent hostage returns have been the bodies of some of those killed on the 7th of October. So Mr. Netanyahu's military strategy is in question, as is his refusal so far to make clear how Gaza will be run in the longer term. He has said there should be no role for the Palestinian Authority, which governs the West Bank. So Saudi Arabia and other Arab countries could be important in building an international alliance to shape Gaza's future. Jake Sullivan will also voice continued US insistence that Israel restricts its military offensive in Rafah and ensures more humanitarian aid reaches Palestinians.
Right-wing politicians from across Europe and beyond are attending a conference in Madrid. Argentina's new president, Javier Milei, and head of France's National Rally Party, the former National Front, Marine Le Pen, are both there. She said many attending wanted to reorient the EU, a reference to next month's elections for the European Parliament. The main political parties have said they both expect to be criticised when the inquiry into the infected blood scandal issues its final report tomorrow. Nearly 30,000 people were affected when they received blood transfusions on the NHS, mainly in the 1970s and 80s. The senior cabinet minister, Grant Shapps, said families had been let down over decades, while Labour said justice had taken too long. Here's our political correspondent, Tony Bonsignori.
Tomorrow's final report from Sir Brian Langstaff is expected to make difficult reading for Labour and the Conservatives. Among the questions that will be addressed, how was this allowed to happen for so long? Why did it take until 2017 for a formal inquiry to be established? And when will compensation finally be paid? The Defence Secretary, Grant Shapps, told the BBC's Laura Kuenssberg the scandal was shameful and said ministers would act on the report. Labour's Shadow Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, said his party would take any criticism on the chin and would honour any commitment on compensation made by the government if it won the next election. A detailed government response is due to follow later in the week. Tomorrow, though, is expected to be primarily a day focused on the victims, 3,000 of whom have already died.
A 14-year-old boy has died after getting into difficulties in the River Tyne at Ovingham in Northumberland. A second boy, aged 13, was rescued and taken to hospital, where he's in a critical condition. The Defence Secretary Grant Shapps has ordered a review to find more planes to take part in a parachute drop over Normandy to mark the 80th anniversary of D-Day. It's feared plans may have to be scaled back because only one aircraft is currently available. Simon Jones reports.
Hundreds of paratroopers had been expected to take part in the D-Day jump, but the display could be much smaller than originally planned due to a shortage of A400M transport aircraft. Some have been taking part in operations over Gaza and Eastern Europe. The former chair of the Commons Defence Committee, Tobias Ellwood, told the Mail on Sunday cutbacks had left the RAF short of heavy lifting transport capacity, something he described as a terrible mistake. Grant Shapps, though, told the BBC's Laura Kuenssberg it was hugely important to remember the past, and he was confident additional planes would be found.
Simon Jones reporting.
Thanks very much, Tom. Right now in Madrid, a political gathering with a difference. It's organised by Vox, a socially conservative and nationalist party. It's not the singing, but the list of speakers at the gathering that is intriguing. Via video link from Hungary, Prime Minister Viktor Orban, from Italy, Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, and in person, Marine Le Pen, the leader of Rassemblement National.
Indeed, Europe, the real Europe, the Europe of freedom and of peoples, the Europe of sovereignty and of states, needs our combined forces.
This is not just a local party conference, but an attempt to gather and rally the populist or radical right 3 weeks before the European Parliament elections. And it's the populist right, anti-immigration, opposed to European integration, sceptical of LGBT rights, hostile to grand climate change projects,
but looks as if it will provide the surprise when Europe votes. In Madrid, outside the Vox gathering, our correspondent Guy Hedgecoe spoke to people waiting to go in and asked them why they supported Vox.
I think it's the only political party that actually cares about the country. They try to fight this illegal immigration, and also I think they also try to fight these social values that they are being lost. For example, feminism, the right for women to have the same rights as men. I think nowadays these rights are being lost, or maybe people doesn't see them as they used to be.
It stands for democracy and freedom. It's about defending the Spanish Constitution and obviously a whole set of principles and values which I identify fully.
I think that is kind of a meritocracy. I think you have to earn yourself, but no expect nothing from the government to be your self-made life. So I think that that's the values that I think that it represents.
Natalie Tocci is director of the Institute of International Affairs in Rome. She gave me her assessment of the populist right's prospects in next month's European elections.
There is the expectation that the populist right, which in the European Parliament essentially revolves around two groups, those two groups are going to both increase in the number of seats. Probably not to the extent of actually overturning the traditional, so to speak, majority that has constituted, the majority in favour of, say, the President of the European Commission. But the ambition basically is for those groups, together with the moderate right, to constitute eventually an alternative majority to the traditional pro-European majority in the Parliament.
The parties of the different nations that go towards making up the populist right are unsurprisingly divided in some of their aims, but they're united in some. What is it that unifies the populist right across Europe?
What unifies them is exactly what divides them. So what unifies them is that they are all nationalists. The nationalism essentially then spills into a vision of Europe and of the European Union, which basically boils down to the hollowing out of the European Union, because it's the idea of a Europe of nations, right, which is in a sense anathema to European integration. And it's precisely that point that then ends up dividing them. For example, if you are Italy and you are on the Mediterranean, you will have a very different view on migration than if you're, say, the Netherlands, right? You will have an interest in the Netherlands accepting some migrants coming in from Europe, but of course, if you're builders in the Netherlands, that's exactly what you don't want to see happen. And you can, literally go down, whether it's climate, migration, Russia, defense, you can literally go down all policy areas. So what unites them is the nationalism, but the policy solutions will very often differ.
Is the one thing that unites them a dislike of supranational activity, of the fundamentals of the European Union? And does it pose a threat to common European action?
Well, yes, absolutely. The first wave of the populist Eurosceptic right was basically taking place around the time of the Brexit referendum. It's about
likely to be?
Actually, Europe continues to be what main member states make out of the European Union, that is to say. I think it's very important to realize that there is no such thing as a European people, and that trade decisions about the issues where nations want to go to European level decision making, and there are other issues, other areas where member states will retain their rights to make decisions as they see fit.
Fidesz is not just about the machinery of European decision-making, is it? It's also, I think it's fair to say, a socially conservative force, one that rejects quite a lot of fairly common beliefs about LGBT rights, abortion, issues that perhaps the centrist politicians now take for granted. Fidesz is opposed to. Is that fair?
What we see today in Europe is that many of the, as you put it, socially conservative values about nation, about family, about marriage, about preserving a European identity and cultural heritage, many of those issues have been left behind by mainstream, once conservative or Christian democratic parties, and that millions of European voters feel that they've been betrayed and nobody really speaks about those issues that are important too. Fidesz does speak about these issues. We have a very clear stance, for instance, against mass illegal migration, which is, I think, the single most important challenge.
Is it you feel, your understanding in conversations with other like-minded political parties in other European nations, that the political tide is flowing in your favour?
That's exactly my impression, and that is because I think our positions are based on common sense. Now, at the upcoming elections, European Parliament elections, I hope that we will be able to form either a new group or an alliance of parties in the European Parliament. The form really can be different. What we reject is over-centralization in Brussels. We reject Brussels bureaucrats taking up political positions without popular support, without being democratically elected.
I just wonder, and I'm not trying to score a political point here, but I wonder what you think so far you have achieved, what you've managed to change in European politics.
Particularly Prime Minister Viktor Orban has managed to show that there is another way, that it is possible to do something else that the Brussels bureaucrats propose, and that it is okay to say that we want to preserve our country the way it is, and we're not ready to open it up to a multicultural revolution dictated by some left-wing radicals, Brussels bureaucrats, and we have shown that it is possible. That's why I think there is so much interest and there's so much appreciation of Viktor Orban's positions across Europe and in fact globally too.
Balázs Mikhelyi from Hungary's Fidesz party. Poland also saw 2 terms of government by the socially conservative, Eurosceptic and anti-immigrant law and justice party. Even though it emerged as the largest party at the last election, it couldn't form a government. It's the centre-right civic platform that leads the coalition government now. I asked Poland's Foreign Minister Radek Sikorski what he thought drove support for the populist right.
You usually get populist parties when the establishment has ignored some issues that a section of the public thinks is important, and the wide establishment tries to find a sensible solution to the identified problem. Because populists usually offer simple solutions to difficult issues. Now, for example, the peoples of Europe want the borders of the Schengen zone controlled. And we just passed a migration pact that addresses some people look for solutions, others play on people's fears.
Did civic platform have to adjust as a result of the pact with law and justice? Did it have to tack to the right?
Yes, we treated the message that we got from the Polish electorate on the security of borders very seriously. The Prime Minister has just in fact announced that we will be constructing fortifications along that border as well against any Belarusian Russian attacks.
Immigration was one issue that Law and Justice spoke out upon. It was also a socially conservative force. Did you feel the pressure there?
Yes, I think people react to the speed of modernization, of secularization, and some of those fears are justified. Poland is the fastest secularizing country in Europe, and that, of course, has political consequences.
Do you see the broader European populist right as a threat to the European mainstream?
Well, not only that, as a threat to the existence of the European Union itself. You know, some of these people say that they want to bring back the superiority of national law over EU law. And of course, the EU is impossible if every agreement that was reached in Brussels was then challenged on the basis of national law.
When it comes to the European elections, there are predictions of the various groupings in the European Parliament swinging quite firmly towards the right, or seeing the right-wing groupings grow in strength. Again, do you see a challenge there for the ability of Europe to act as a whole?
Yes, because, for example, they are absolutely against extending or rather dropping unanimity on some issues, even when it's clearly in Poland's interest, for example, for sanctions on Russia to be decided on a majority basis, so that Viktor Orban can't veto them. But from what I hear, the populists might improve their presence in the European Parliament, but not so much as to prevent a mainstream coalition from having a majority.
Radek Sikorski, Foreign Minister of Poland. José Manuel Barroso is a former Prime Minister of Portugal. He's also a two-term President of the European Commission. I asked him how he views the rise of Europe's populist right.
I'm certainly concerned because in the European Union, of course, nationalism is a problem. We are, to some extent, a supranational organization with powers that are above member states. It's a specific and more dangerous challenge, because if we assume that some countries are going to follow strictly nationalistic policies, that will, of course, put in crisis the European Union. So I'm concerned, although I have to qualify this concern. I believe the European